I still can't believe I let Olivia talk me into this. My sister has always been dramatic, to say the least. But when she came to me asking for help with her honeymoon, I thought maybe this time was different. Maybe she had finally grown up a little. To set the scene, Olivia had just married Ethan, a surprisingly decent guy. Her first husband, Jake, had been a walking red flag, the kind of man who thought holding a job was optional and treated Olivia more like an unpaid assistant than a wife. I had stayed out of it, but when they finally divorced, it was hard not to say, "I told you so." When she met Ethan, though, I had hope. He had a stable career in finance, was polite, and seemed genuinely crazy about her. They got engaged after 6 months of dating, and before I knew it, she was asking me for help with the wedding. I said no. It wasn't my responsibility, but I gave them a nice check as a gift and thought that would be the end of it. Then came the honeymoon request. She called me, her voice all sweet and persuasive. They had their eyes set on a 9-day trip to Hawaii beachfront bungalows, fancy restaurants, a full-blown luxury getaway. But whoops, they had slightly underestimated how much it would cost. She insisted she didn't want to start their marriage in debt and asked if I'd be willing to help a little. I hesitated. Olivia and I had never been close. She was the type who expected the world to cater to her and threw tantrums when it didn't. But Ethan seemed like a good influence, and honestly, I was just relieved she had moved on from Jake. So, against my better judgment, I agreed. And by help a little, she meant $6,000. I covered everything: flights, accommodations, expensive beach bungalows, high-end dinners, even activities like snorkeling and a helicopter tour. It was a ridiculous amount of money, but I figured if it made her happy, it was worth it. Maybe, just maybe, she'd appreciate me for once. Then they left for Hawaii, and something weird happened. Olivia, the woman who practically lived on Instagram, didn't post a single picture. No selfies, no hashtag living my best life captions. Nothing. My wife, my parents, and even my younger brother, Alex, noticed and thought it was strange. Ethan had always been annoyed by her social media obsession, so we assumed he had convinced her to unplug for a while. When they got back, we had a family dinner at my parents' house. My wife and I arrived early, helping set the table and chatting with my mom. I was actually excited to hear about their trip. Then Olivia walked in. She looked tan but had a sour expression, like she had just smelled something rotten. I felt a sinking feeling in my gut. The mood at the table shifted instantly. Ethan, at least, seemed happy. As we all settled in, he started telling us about the trip. The snorkeling was amazing, he said. We saw sea turtles, tropical fish like being in another world, and the helicopter tour, unreal. My parents asked a million questions. I started to feel good about my decision. It sounded like they had a great time. Ethan even pulled out his phone to show us pictures, gorgeous sunset views from their bungalow. A candlelit dinner by the ocean, Olivia smiling with a flower lie around her neck. My mom beamed. Your brother really went all out for you two. Such a generous way to start your new life together. Everyone nodded in agreement. I glanced at Olivia, expecting her to say something, maybe even a simple thank you. Instead, she put down her drink, stood up and scoffed. Are you kidding me? The room went silent. A 9-day vacation? That's it? She snapped. Do you know what people post online? Month-long trips to Europe, yacht parties in Santorini. We couldn't even get more than a basic bungalow. And don't even get me started on the restaurants, half of them were so basic. I blinked, stunned. At first I thought she was joking, but her face was serious. You're such a loser, she continued, glaring at me. If you couldn't afford a real honeymoon, you shouldn't have offered in the first place. My wife's fork clattered onto her plate. Alex's jaw dropped. Even Ethan looked embarrassed. My mom and dad exchanged one of those silent, "What the hell just happened?" looks, and then all eyes turned to me. I took a slow breath, trying to process what I had just heard, and then something in me snapped. Wow, I said, my voice eerily calm. You're amazing. Olivia crossed her arms, waiting for me to back down. I didn't. Amanda, can you hear yourself right now? I said, locking eyes with her. I spent $6,000 to give you and Ethan the honeymoon of your dreams. $6,000. And you have the nerve to stand here and call me cheap? A loser? She rolled her eyes. That did it. The fact that you even feel entitled to complain about something like this is insane, I continued. Do you have any idea how many people would kill for a trip like that? Do you realize how spoiled you sound? She scoffed, but I wasn't done. You want to talk about being cheap? Fine. Let's talk about how you've never paid me back for anything in your life. Not the money I loaned you for your car in college. Not the rent I covered when you moved out. Not the cash I gave you after your divorce when you said you were struggling. I've always helped you because you're my sister. But this, I gestured toward her, this is beyond selfish. You can forget about me ever doing anything like this for you again. Silence. Olivia's face turned red, but before she could say anything, I turned to Ethan. And honestly, I feel sorry for you, man. You seem like a good guy, but if this is how she treats people who go out of their way for her, you're in for a rough ride. Ethan looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. My mom started to speak, but I held up a hand. I'm not finished. I turned back to Olivia. If you keep acting like this, no one is going to want to help you. Not me, not mom and dad. Not anyone. And newsflash, having 11,000 Instagram followers doesn't make you some kind of star. You're not a princess, and I'm done pretending you are. The room was dead silent. For once, Olivia didn't have a comeback. My dad coughed awkwardly. My mom tried to smooth things over. I wasn't interested. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and looked at my wife. We're leaving. As we walked out, I heard Olivia muttering something under her breath. I didn't care enough to turn around. I was done. The drive home was quiet. My wife, Emily, didn't say much, but I could tell she was just as pissed as I was. I kept replaying the moment in my head, Olivia standing there, arms crossed, calling me cheap after I dropped $6,000 on her honeymoon. $6,000. When we pulled into the driveway, Emily finally spoke. You did the right thing, she said, but what about Ethan? He didn't even try to defend you. He just sat there like a statue. That had been bothering me too. Ethan had always seemed like the calm, level-headed type, but during Olivia's tantrum, he barely reacted. He just sat there, staring at his plate, like he'd seen this play out 100 times before. At first, I figured he was just embarrassed, but now, I wasn't so sure. I went to bed still fuming, but I woke up to something even more infuriating, my phone buzzing nonstop. It was my mom, I groaned. Already knowing this conversation was going to be exhausting, I answered, and before I could even say hello, she jumped in. Olivia came over this morning, she said in a hushed tone, like she was delivering classified intel. Let me guess, I said. She's still mad? Mom sighed. No. Actually, she was crying. That caught my attention. Olivia never cried. Well, she did, but only when she wanted something. She said you humiliated her in front of everyone, and now Ethan's barely speaking to her. I frowned. Why would Ethan be mad at her? I'm the one who walked out. I don't know, Mom admitted, but she kept saying that everything is ruined and that you don't understand what she's dealing with. That threw me. Olivia's life had always been an open book, whether we wanted it to be or not. She lived for drama, for oversharing every detail of her relationships. But now, there was something she wasn't saying that wasn't like her. After I hung up, I told Emily what Mom had said. You think something's going on between them? She asked. I don't know, I admitted. But if there is, it's not my problem anymore. And I meant it. Olivia had crossed a line, and I wasn't about to get dragged back into her mess. But by the middle of the week, my curiosity got the better of me. I checked Ethan's Instagram, hoping for some kind of update. His page was private, which wasn't unusual. But Olivia's? Gone. Not deactivated. Not switched to private. Deleted. That was weird. Olivia without social media was like a fish without water. And then, out of nowhere, I got a text. Ethan, hey, can we talk? Just you and me. I have some things to explain. I stared at my phone, trying to make sense of it. Ethan barely ever texted me. He was polite, sure, but we'd never been close. And now he wanted to explain some things. Something about it didn't sit right. But my curiosity won out. Me, sure. When? Ethan, tonight. I'll come over. That evening, Ethan showed up looking rough. His usual clean cut, put together look, gone. His hair was a mess. His shirt was wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "Hey," I said, opening the door. "Hey," he muttered, stepping inside. I led him to the living room, and for a few minutes he just sat there, staring at the coffee table, fidgeting with his wedding ring. Finally, he took a deep breath and said, "I owe you an apology." I raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For Olivia. For what she said to you. For everything." Now he had my full attention. "What's going on, Ethan?" I asked. He hesitated, like he wasn't sure how much to say. Then he dropped the bomb. "The honeymoon. It wasn't just a honeymoon," he said. "It was supposed to be a reset for our marriage." I blinked. "Reset? You've been married for a month." Ethan let out a bitter laugh and ran a hand through his hair. "Yeah, I know how that sounds. But Olivia, she's been difficult, to say the least. Planning the wedding was a nightmare. She went way over budget, ignored every limit I set, and had meltdowns over the dumbest things. I thought it was just wedding stress, but after we got married, it got worse." I sat back, trying to process what he was saying. "She started accusing me of not loving her enough," he continued. "Said I didn't do enough to make her feel special. He stopped and exhaled sharply. "She threw a vase at me once." My jaw tightened. Olivia was a handful, sure. But this? I had no idea it was this bad. When she started talking about the honeymoon, Ethan went on. "I thought maybe if we got away from it all, she'd calm down. She promised it would be a fresh start." He scoffed. "By the third day, she was already complaining. The room wasn't big enough. The food wasn't fancy enough. The snorkeling wasn't exclusive enough. It was a disaster. I didn't know what to say. And when we got back," he shook his head, "I told her I was done. I'm filing for divorce." I froze. "Already?" Ethan must have seen the shock on my face, because he gave a bitter laugh. "I know how it sounds. Believe me, I wanted to make it work. But Olivia, she's not who I thought she was. And the worst part? His jaw clenched. She's still talking to Jake. I sat up straight. What? Yeah, Ethan said, rubbing his temples. She told me it was harmless, but I found the texts. She's been venting to him about me since before we were even married. She told him I wasn't man enough for her. I felt my stomach twist. I didn't know whether to feel bad for Ethan or furious at Olivia. Well, Ethan sighed, standing up. I just thought you should know. You were trying to do something good for us, and you didn't deserve what she said to you. I'm sorry you got caught up in all this. I nodded slowly, still trying to process everything. As Ethan walked to the door, Emily came into the room. She must have overheard, because she just shook her head and said, I don't even know where to begin. Neither do I admitted. That night, I barely slept. Ethan's words kept replaying in my head. She's still talking to Jake. She told him I wasn't man enough. It was like finding out there was a whole other side of Olivia I didn't know. And honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted to know. The next morning, my phone rang again. It was my mom. Olivia's here, she said in a low voice. She's been crying since she walked in. I think you two need to talk, I sighed. Did Ethan tell her he's filing for divorce? There was a pause. What divorce? Mom asked. She didn't say anything about that. Of course not. Typical Olivia. She'd never admit things weren't perfect unless she absolutely had to. I debated whether to even go over there, but then I thought maybe it was time she heard the truth, even if she didn't want to. I debated whether to go. A big part of me wanted to just ignore it, let Olivia sit in her mess and deal with it herself. But another part of me, the part that had spent years bailing her out, felt like I should at least hear what she had to say. So, against my better judgment, I drove over to my parents' house. When I walked in, Olivia was sitting at the kitchen table, hunched over, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. Her eyes were red and puffy, like she had been crying for hours. She looked up at me, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't have that smug, entitled look on her face. I'm sorry, she said softly. I crossed my arms. Sorry for what exactly? For what I said at dinner. I was out of line. You didn't deserve that. It wasn't the dramatic crocodile tear apology I was expecting. She actually seemed sincere, but I wasn't about to let her off the hook that easily. I pulled out a chair and sat across from her. Kevin came to see me last night, I said, watching her reaction closely. She froze. What did he say? I leaned forward. He told me everything, Olivia. The honeymoon, the arguments, the vase, everything. Her lower lip trembled, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she let out a shaky breath and muttered, He's filing for divorce, isn't he? I nodded. She squeezed her eyes shut. shaking her head. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. I thought marriage would fix things. I thought if we had this perfect wedding, this perfect honeymoon, everything would be okay. I sighed. That's not how it works, she sniffled, wiping her nose with her sleeve. I know. I hesitated, then said, and talking to Jake behind Kevin's back? What the hell were you thinking? She flinched, like I had physically hit her. It wasn't. It wasn't like that. Jake was going through a divorce too, so I thought he'd understand. I just needed someone to vent to. Vent? I repeated, incredulous. Olivia, you told him Kevin wasn't man enough for you. How is that venting? That's sabotage. Her eyes widened, and I realized something she didn't know. Kevin had found the texts. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, as if trying to come up with an excuse. But instead of defending herself, she just crumbled. She dropped her head into her hands. I don't know what's wrong with me, she whispered. I'm ruining everything. First Jake, now Kevin. I don't even know who I am anymore. For the first time in years, Olivia wasn't trying to spin the story to make herself look better. She wasn't trying to blame someone else. She was just defeated. And honestly, I didn't know how to feel about that. I let out a long breath. Look, I can't fix this for you. You have to figure this out yourself. But I meant what I said at dinner. I'm done bailing you out, she nodded, still staring down at the table. I understand. And for the first time, I actually believed her. We sat in silence for a while. It was weird. Normally, Olivia would argue, cry, throw a tantrum, anything to shift the attention away from her mistakes. But this time, she just sat there. I finally broke the silence. So, what are you going to do? She swallowed hard. I don't know. Well, you better figure it out fast, I said, because Kevin's already checked out. She winced at that, but I wasn't going to sugarcoat it for her. I stood up. I'm gonna say this once, so listen carefully. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time: fear. You're an adult, Olivia. Your choices have consequences. If you want to keep throwing tantrums and treating people like garbage, fine. But don't come crying to me when it all falls apart. I'm done. She sucked in a breath. You don't mean that? Oh, I do. I folded my arms. Because here's the thing, Mom and Dad don't have the money to keep bailing you out. You know that. If you want someone to finance your mistakes, take a good look at me. I pointed at myself. Guess what? It's not happening again. She opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. You want to leave Kevin? Fine, that's your decision. But don't expect me to pay for your next wedding, or your next honeymoon, or your next whatever. You either stay with him and try to make it work, or you figure out how to survive on your own. Either way, I'm done being your safety net. Her face fell, and for a second, I thought she was going to cry again. But instead, she straightened up, wiped her face, and whispered, I'll fix this. I promise. I studied her for a moment, then nodded. I hope you do. And with that, I walked out. Mom stopped me in the hallway, lowering her voice. That was hard, she said. I shrugged. It had to be. She sighed. She's your sister, you know. I know, I said, but she's also a grown woman, and I'm tired of cleaning up her messes. I left without looking back. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about Olivia. I wasn't stressed about what trouble she'd drag me into next. It was like cutting off a weight I didn't even realize I was carrying. And honestly, it felt good. For the first time in years, I felt free. No more Olivia drama. No more financial black hole draining my bank account. No more feeling obligated to clean up her messes. It was like stepping out of a storm into the sun. And yet, a small part of me deep down, buried under all the frustration, felt a little sad. Not for what I lost, but for what Olivia could have been if she had just gotten her act together sooner. But that was her problem now. A week passed, and I didn't hear a word from Olivia. No texts, no calls, nothing. It was weird, but honestly, kind of refreshing. Then, one morning I got a text from Ethan. Ethan, we're going to counseling. I'm not sure if it'll work, but we're trying. I stared at my phone for a long time before responding. Me, good luck, man. Hope it works out. I meant it. Ethan was a good guy, and despite everything, I didn't want his life to implode. But at the same time, I knew Olivia. She might be on her best behavior for now, but eventually, she'd slip back into her old ways. Still, it wasn't my problem anymore. Emily and I focused on our own lives. Work was good, life was peaceful, and for once, I didn't feel like I had to brace myself for the next Olivia-related disaster. Then, a few weeks later, I ran into my mom at the grocery store. She looked tired. Have you talked to Olivia? She asked. Nope, I said, tossing a carton of eggs into my cart. And I'd like to keep it that way, Mom sighed. She's struggling. Yeah, well, I muttered. Actions have consequences. Mom frowned, shifting her purse higher on her shoulder. I know she's screwed up, but she's still your sister, and she's trying. I let out a slow breath. Trying what, exactly? Mom hesitated. She got a part-time job. That made me pause. Olivia had never worked for anything a day in her life. If she was actually putting in effort, maybe she had learned something. Still, I wasn't going to make it easy for her. Good for her, I said. She should have done that years ago. Mom pursed her lips but didn't push it. As I walked away, I felt a twinge of guilt, but I pushed it aside. I had nothing to apologize for. Olivia was an adult. It wasn't my responsibility to fix her anymore. A month later, Olivia finally texted me. Olivia, hey, can we talk? I stared at the message for a while before finally replying. Me. About what? Olivia, I need some advice. That threw me. Olivia never asked for advice. She just expected people to hand her solutions. After some hesitation, I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop. When I walked in, she was already sitting at a table, nervously stirring her drink. She looked different. No designer clothes, no perfect makeup, no Instagram-ready outfit. Just a hoodie, leggings, and a tired expression. She glanced up at me. Hey, I sat down across from her. All right, what's up? She bit her lip. Ethan left. I wasn't surprised, but it still sucked to hear. Divorce? She nodded. Yeah, he moved out last week. I waited for the usual Olivia meltdown, the excuses, the blaming, the dramatics, but she just let out a deep sigh. I deserved it. That caught me off guard. She gave a sad little smile. I pushed him too far. I kept thinking he'd stick around no matter what, but turns out people have limits. I leaned back in my chair. Yeah, they do. She stared at her coffee, swirling it absent-mindedly. I think I finally get it now. Get what? I asked. She looked up at me, her eyes serious. That people aren't just there to fix my problems. That if I keep treating them like crap, they'll eventually walk away. She shook her head. I thought being married would make me feel, I don't know, secure, loved, but it doesn't work like that. And when it didn't, I just lashed out. At Ethan, at you, at everyone. I studied her for a long moment. So what now? She shrugged. I'm trying to figure that out. I got a second job. I'm looking for a cheaper apartment. And I'm in therapy. That last part actually surprised me. Therapy? She nodded. Yeah. Turns out, I have a lot of stuff to unpack, I exhaled. Well, good. She hesitated. Do you think maybe we can start over? I didn't answer right away. The truth was, I wanted to believe her. But trust wasn't something you could rebuild overnight. I don't know, I admitted. It's gonna take time. She swallowed hard but nodded. I get that. I am trying, you know. I gave her a small nod, then keep trying. She smiled just a little. And for the first time in a long time, I almost saw the sister I used to know. We didn't magically repair our relationship that day. There was no big emotional reunion, no perfect moment where everything was fixed, but it was a start. And for once, I actually believed Olivia wanted to change. I wasn't waiting around to see if she'd mess it all up again. If she did, that was on her. But if she really did pull it together, maybe just maybe one day she'd finally prove me wrong. Story 2. Since I was a kid, I've always been different. While my parents pushed my older sister, Emily, to chase stability, college, career, marriage, I wanted to create. Art was my escape, my passion, my future. I spent hours sketching superheroes, creatures, entire worlds in my notebooks. By the time I finished high school, I knew exactly what I wanted, to be an animator. My parents, of course, hated that idea. You're not going to college? Mom repeated, gripping a dish towel like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Dad scoffed from his chair. So what? You're just gonna sit in your room drawing cartoons for the rest of your life? Emily, ever the golden child, chimed in with a smirk. You know, real jobs exist, right? I tried to explain the potential, how animators were making a living on YouTube, how digital art was growing, but they wouldn't hear it. YouTube? Dad scoffed. That's not a real job, Robin. You're going to be living with us forever at this rate. The worst part? At first, they were right. For the first 2 years, I struggled. My videos barely got views. I made pennies. Every Sunday at dinner, Emily would find new ways to mock me. Robin, have you seen the comments on your latest video? She said one night, scrolling through her phone with fake concern. Brutal. Maybe animation isn't your thing. Mom and Dad didn't even pretend to defend me. But if there's one thing about me, it's that I'm stubborn as hell. I studied successful creators, revamped my animation style, improved my storytelling. Slowly, things started changing. 100 subscribers became 100, then 10,000, then 50,000. 3 years passed. I had sponsors, merch, contracts. I was making real money, but I kept quiet. Let them think I was still struggling. Until I was ready to drop the bomb. One Sunday dinner, Emily and her husband, Mark, were gloating over their latest promotion, my parents hanging on every word. I set my fork down. I have an announcement. Everyone turned to me. I'm moving out next week. Got an apartment. Silence. Emily nearly choked on her wine. You what? Dad's brows furrowed. How are you affording an apartment? I took a slow sip of water. My channel is doing well. Very well. Mom dropped her fork. Emily narrowed her eyes. How much money are we talking? I just smiled. Enough. They spent the rest of dinner trying to pry a number out of me. I didn't give them the satisfaction. The next morning, I packed my things and left. For the first time in my life, I was free. I threw myself into work. My new setup was perfect. A real animation studio in my own apartment. My style evolved. My subscriber count exploded. The money kept rolling in. One day, I showed up at my parents' house for dinner in designer jeans and carrying a real leather bag. Emily's eyes zeroed in on it. Is that Gucci? She asked, trying to sound casual. Maybe, I said, sipping my drink. That's when things started to change. At first, it was subtle. The water bill was really high this month, Dad mentioned one evening. The fridge is acting up, Mom added. I wrote a check on the spot. Why not? I could afford it. Then it became a habit. The electricity bill? No problem. Roof repairs? Sure. Appliances? Just tell me where to send the money. For the first time ever, my parents praised me. Then Emily's life started to fall apart. She had her first baby, and suddenly, Mark's salary wasn't cutting it. At dinner, she pushed food around her plate, looking exhausted. Everything's so expensive these days. Diapers, formula, clothes. She eyed my new watch, a gift to myself for hitting 5 million subscribers. That night, I set up a quiet monthly transfer to her account. A week later, she called me. You don't have to do this, she said, voice full of pride but also relief. I want to, I replied. That's what family is for. I thought I was helping. I had no idea what I was setting myself up for. Helping my family felt good. At first, it was little things. Covering a bill here, fixing an appliance there. I barely noticed the money leaving my account. I was making more than enough to handle it. Then Emily got pregnant again. At dinner one night, she sighed as she rinsed dishes. The landlord's raising the rent again. With another baby coming, I don't know how we're going to manage. I didn't even hesitate. Don't worry about the rent. I'll cover it. Just like that, I became responsible for my sister's entire housing situation. The same sister who used to mock my cartoons was now living in an apartment paid for by those very cartoons. Funny how money changes people's perspectives. Meanwhile, my own life was booming. I hit 10 million subscribers. I expanded my team, hiring talented animators to take on bigger projects. I leased office space, downtown floor-to-ceiling windows, modern furniture, the whole deal. Mom was shocked when I told her. You have an office? Like, with employees? Yep, she blinked. A real company? I just smiled. It was weird, watching their perception of me shift. The same people who dismissed my dreams were now proud of me, or so I thought. I bought myself a sleek new car, not flashy, but nice. I was even house hunting, thinking it was time for something bigger. Then, one night at dinner, Dad sighed. The roof needs work before winter, and property taxes went up again. Mom nodded. We've been trying to save, but, well, I grabbed my checkbook. How much? The relief on their faces felt like validation. I had earned my place at this table. But looking back, I should have noticed the shift, how it went from occasional help to expected help, how every conversation circled back to money, how their approval seemed tied to how much I was willing to give. But I ignored the warning signs, because it felt good to be needed. Then, I had an idea. How about a family vacation? I suggested one night. 2 weeks in Hawaii, my treat. Mom actually teared up. Hawaii? Emily whispered, like saying it too loud would make the offer disappear. Dead serious. All expenses paid. It was an amazing trip. Mom and Dad's first real luxury vacation. Emily's kids building sandcastles on the beach. Even Mark seemed to relax for the first time in years. Mom cried when we had to leave, but I had an even bigger surprise planned. Their 35th wedding anniversary was coming up, and I wanted to go all out. I threw them a huge party, catered food, decorations, gifts. The biggest gift? A brand new SUV. They'd been driving the same old minivan for a decade, and I wanted them to have something safer, nicer, better. Mom gasped when she saw it. "Robin, this is too much." Dad shook his head in disbelief. "We can't accept this." I smiled. "You can, and you will." They hugged me tight. "We're so proud of you," Mom whispered. At the time, I believed her. I thought, finally, I had their approval. I didn't know what was coming next. 2 weeks later, while my parents were out enjoying their new car, I stayed behind at the house. I wandered into Dad's office, where stacks of old family documents were piled up. I wasn't snooping. I just thought I'd help organize. Then I saw it. A crisp, new manila envelope. Something about it felt off. I opened it. It was a legal document. Last will and testament. My hands started shaking as I read through it. Everything, the house, the car, everything was being left to Emily. Not a single mention of me. I read it again, my mind scrambling to make sense of it. This couldn't be right. I'd been paying for the house's upkeep, the bills, the repairs. I'd bought the damn car. And yet, in black and white, they had erased me. I sat there, staring at the paper, my stomach churning. Then I heard at the front door opening. Mom laughing. "Robin," she called. "We're back." I stood up, still holding the will. They walked in, shopping bags in hand, smiling, until they saw my face, until they saw what I was holding. The bags dropped to the floor. Mom's face went white. Dad looked like he'd seen a ghost. I held up the envelope. Would someone like to explain this? The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Mom was the first to recover. She forced a smile too tight, too fake. We were going to tell you." I stared at her. "When?" Dad cleared his throat. "Robin, it's not what you think." I held up the will. "Really?" "Because it looks pretty clear to me." That's when Mom's whole demeanor shifted. The fake warmth disappeared, replaced by sharp annoyance. "How dare you go through our private documents?" she snapped, voice rising. "Who do you think you are, snooping around?" I let out a hollow laugh. "Private? In the house I've been paying for? The house whose bills I cover?" Dad sighed. "Robin, be reasonable. You're already successful. You have your own money, your own apartment. Emily needs this more than you do." And there it was. I clenched my jaw. "That's not the point, Dad. If you wanted to leave everything to Emily, fine. But you could have told me. Instead, you went behind my back right after I bought you a car, right after telling me how proud you were." Mom crossed her arms. "We don't have to explain ourselves. We're your parents. We can do what we want with our property." I stared at them, the realization hitting me all at once. I was never part of their plans. I was just the ATM. I exhaled slowly, placing the envelope back on the table. "Keep it," I said. "Keep all of it." And then I walked out. The calls started that night. I ignored them. Then Emily called. I stupidly picked up. "How dare you?" she screeched, before I could even say hello. "How dare you try to steal my inheritance?" I blinked. "I don't want the house, Emily." "Liar, you're jealous. You hate that Mom and Dad picked me." I let out a dry laugh. "Emily, I'm literally paying your rent right now." "Oh, here we go," she spat. "Always throwing your money in everyone's face. That's all you care about, money." I felt something inside me snap. I hung up. Then I blocked her number. Then I blocked Mom and Dad too. I threw myself into work after that. My team and I were working on our biggest animation project yet. The creative energy flowed, turns out. Not carrying an entire family's financial burdens is fantastic for productivity. Then, one Friday afternoon, my phone lit up. Mom. I let it go to voicemail, then another call, and another. Finally, a text. "We need to have a family dinner. It's important." I don't know why I went. Maybe curiosity, maybe closure. Either way, the next night, I found myself at their house, sitting across from them at the dining table. Emily and her husband were there too. The food was untouched. Something was off. Dad cleared his throat. "Robin, we've made a decision," Emily smirked. "We're transferring the house to Emily's name immediately," Mom said, carefully watching my reaction. "We've already talked to a lawyer." Emily leaned forward, sickly sweet. "Just to make sure you can't contest the will later. You understand we have to protect our family's interests." I stared at her, then at Mom, then at Dad, and suddenly everything clicked. The bills I covered, the rent I paid, the vacations. The car. It wasn't gratitude they felt. It was entitlement. I pushed my chair back and stood. You know what I just realized? I said, my voice calm. I thought I was helping my family, but I wasn't helping family. I was funding an ATM machine. Mom's expression twisted. What are you talking about? I looked right at her. I'm talking about how you don't see me as your daughter, just as a convenient paycheck. Dad sighed. Robin, don't be dramatic. Starting today, I'm done, I interrupted. No more bills. No more rent, Emily. No more gifts. No more handouts. Nothing. Emily's face dropped. You can't do that. Watch me. Mom's voice turned pleading. Robin, we're family. I met her eyes. No, family doesn't do what you did. Family doesn't smile to your face while stabbing you in the back. Family doesn't take and then treat you like this. They all started yelling at once, Mom crying, Dad calling my name, Emily screaming about how selfish I was. I didn't stay to listen. I walked out, and this time I wasn't coming back. The texts, the voicemails, the guilt trips, they kept coming. I ignored them. Then Mom took it to Facebook. I never thought my own daughter would be so selfish. After everything we've done for her, she's abandoned her family in our time of need. A child's duty is to help their parents, but some children only think of themselves. I read it with mild amusement. The comments rolled in, but not the way she expected. Isn't this the daughter who's been paying all your bills? One cousin wrote. Wait, the one who bought you a new car? An aunt added. Didn't she pay for your Hawaii vacation? Someone else chimed in. Emily jumped into the comments, calling me jealous and bitter. Mom liked her comment, of course. That was the final straw. I picked up my phone and called the insurance company handling the car. Hi, I need to report my car for repossession, I said, voice steady. Yes, I have the paperwork. The tow truck arrived the next morning. Mom's furious texts came instantly. How dare you take our car? We trusted you. This is theft. We're calling the police. I laughed. Then I blocked them. One by one. That was 6 months ago. I haven't spoken to any of them since. I hear things through the family grapevine, Mom and Dad struggling to pay their bills. Emily and Mark downsizing to a smaller apartment. Not my problem. Instead, I've been focusing on myself. Every penny I used to spend on them now goes into my future. I bought my dream house, a beautiful place with a yard and space for a home animation studio. Maybe I'll get a dog. My channel? Bigger than ever. Turns out, when you're not constantly managing other people's crises, you have a lot more creative energy. Sometimes, I wonder if I made the right choice. Then I remember finding that while seeing, in black and white, how they really saw me. I think about all the times they laughed at my dreams, only to turn around and demand the rewards of those same dreams. Some people might call me cold for cutting them off, but here's the thing. They stopped being family long before I stopped sending money. I just had to find that out for myself, buried in a manila envelope in my father's office.